The morning sky was bright, but heavy clouds rolled in without warning, turning the warm sunshine into a cold gray afternoon. Rain began pouring over the city, sending everyone rushing beneath roofs and umbrellas. From the large glass windows of a luxurious mansion, millionaire Everett Sterling happened to glance outside toward the backyard. What he saw made him stop breathing for a moment. His quiet housemaid was sitting alone on a small wooden bench beside the garden, completely soaked by the rain, protecting nothing but a tiny lunchbox wrapped inside an old plastic bag. She wasn't hiding from the storm. She wasn't trying to stay dry. She simply sat there eating slowly, smiling through tears as if the rain itself was hiding her pain. Everett had hired hundreds of employees over the years, but he had never seen anything so heartbreaking. He walked toward the window, unable to understand why someone would choose to eat under a pouring sky when the warm kitchen was only a few steps away. What he would discover over the next few hours would change his heart forever. Before this emotional journey begins, please take a moment to like this video, leave a comment if you believe kindness and second chances can change lives, share this story with someone who needs hope today, and subscribe to Single Dad Empire for more unforgettable stories that remind us humanity still exists. Everett Sterling was one of the wealthiest businessmen in the state. His company owned hotels, restaurants, and office buildings across several cities. Newspapers admired his success, business magazines praised his intelligence, and television interviews often called him a self-made millionaire. Yet behind the polished suits and expensive watches was a lonely man who had spent years believing that success came from discipline alone. He rarely learned the names of his employees and almost never asked about their personal lives. Work came first, profits came second, and emotions usually came last. His mansion was filled with beautiful furniture, priceless paintings, and sparkling chandeliers, yet every evening it echoed with silence. Wealth had given him comfort but quietly stolen the simple connections that once made life meaningful. Among the many employees working inside the mansion was a woman named Mireya Hale. She had joined the household less than a year earlier after answering a small newspaper advertisement. She arrived every morning before sunrise wearing the same neatly pressed uniform despite owning only 2 sets of clothing. She cleaned every room carefully, polished every floor until it reflected sunlight, watered the flowers, prepared guest rooms, and always greeted everyone with a gentle smile. She never complained, never asked for favors, and quietly disappeared each evening after finishing her work. Most employees barely noticed her because she never sought attention. What nobody realized was that Mireya's life outside the mansion was nothing like the peaceful image she showed during the day. She lived in a tiny rented apartment on the edge of the city with her younger brother Rowan, who had been left unable to walk after a terrible construction accident several years earlier. Their parents had passed away within months of each other, leaving Mireya to become both sister and guardian while still in her 20s. Every paycheck disappeared almost immediately into rent, medicine, therapy sessions, and groceries. She skipped meals so Rowan would never have to. She repaired old clothes instead of buying new ones. Even bus fare sometimes became a difficult decision. Still, every morning she arrived at work smiling because she refused to let hardship become her identity. The reason she ate outside in the rain had nothing to do with enjoying storms. Every afternoon she carried a simple lunch made of dry bread, boiled eggs, and rice. During rainy days she chose the garden bench because no one else came there. The sound of falling rain covered the quiet sobs she could no longer hold back. It became the only place where she allowed herself a few minutes to cry before wiping away her tears and returning to work with the same calm smile. She believed sadness should never become someone else's burden. Everett had never noticed this routine until that rainy afternoon. Something about the lonely figure sitting beneath dark clouds refused to leave his mind. Instead of returning to his office, he quietly stepped outside holding a large umbrella. As he approached the bench, he noticed that Mireya carefully divided her lunch into 2 equal portions. One portion she ate slowly. The other she wrapped again with remarkable care before placing it back inside the lunchbox. Everett found it strange because the food had already become wet from the humid air. He politely asked one of the senior staff members about Mireia, but nobody knew much beyond the fact that she worked hard and never missed a day. Curious for reasons he could not explain, Everett decided to look deeper. He contacted the employment agency that had introduced her to the mansion. Her file contained only basic information and one emergency contact listed under Rowan Hale. Nothing else. The following day Everett quietly followed Mireia after work, not out of suspicion but out of genuine concern. She walked nearly 40 minutes instead of taking a bus, stopping twice to compare grocery prices before purchasing only a loaf of bread and a small carton of milk. Eventually she reached an aging apartment building where cracked walls and broken windows revealed years of neglect. Everett watched from across the street as Mireia climbed 3 flights of stairs carrying groceries, medicine, and her carefully protected lunchbox. Unable to ignore what he had seen, Everett knocked on the apartment door later that evening under the excuse of delivering some forgotten paperwork. When the door opened, the truth unfolded before him with heartbreaking clarity. Rowan sat inside an old wheelchair beside a tiny table covered with medical bills. Mireia immediately opened the second half of her lunchbox and placed it before her brother with a smile that hid enormous sacrifice. Only then did Everett understand why she had always divided her meal into 2 portions. She wasn't saving leftovers for herself. She had been bringing home half her lunch every single day because buying enough food for both of them was becoming impossible. Everett looked around the apartment. The furniture had been repaired countless times. Blankets covered broken windows to keep out the cold. Medicine bottles lined one shelf while unpaid bills covered another. Yet despite overwhelming hardship, everything remained spotless. The apartment radiated dignity rather than despair. As Everett quietly listened to Mireia's story, he discovered another painful truth. Rowan had once been an engineering student with dreams of designing safer buildings. The construction accident that left him unable to walk had also buried those dreams beneath years of expensive treatment. Mireia had abandoned her own university education to become his caregiver. She never regretted that decision because family meant more to her than personal ambition. The only thing that hurt was watching her brother blame himself for the difficult life she now lived. That night Everett returned to his mansion unable to sleep. The image of Mireia smiling while secretly starving herself replayed endlessly in his mind. He walked through enormous empty rooms filled with luxury and suddenly realized how little those possessions truly meant compared to the quiet love he had witnessed inside a tiny apartment. Over the next several weeks Everett began making changes without drawing attention to himself. He increased every household employee's salary, expanded health insurance benefits, and created an emergency assistance fund for workers facing family crises. He made sure those improvements appeared as company policy rather than personal charity because he wanted every employee to receive dignity instead of pity. But Mireia's situation required more than policy changes. Everett arranged for Rowan to meet one of the country's leading rehabilitation specialists. Advanced treatment, physical therapy, and new mobility equipment were quietly provided through a charitable foundation rather than directly from him. Rowan believed generous donors had chosen to support accident victims. Mireia never suspected Everett's involvement. Months passed beneath bright summer skies. Slowly Rowan regained strength that doctors once believed impossible. For the first time in years he stood with assistance, then took one careful step, then another. Every tiny victory filled the apartment with tears of joy. Mireia continued working faithfully, unaware that the millionaire she cleaned for celebrated every medical report from a distance. One sunny afternoon Everett visited the rehabilitation center where Rowan had just completed another successful therapy session. Watching the siblings embrace beneath the warm daylight, he realized something unexpected had changed inside himself as well. For years he believed leadership meant building companies. Now he understood that true leadership meant lifting people. Eventually the truth reached Mireia through one of the foundation administrators who accidentally mentioned Everett's involvement. She returned to the mansion the next morning carrying quiet gratitude rather than surprise. Everett expected thanks, but instead she simply continued working with the same humility she had always shown. Her kindness had never depended on receiving kindness in return. Everett finally admitted that seeing her eating alone in the rain had awakened something he thought success had erased forever. He confessed that he had spent decades measuring life through profits while overlooking the invisible battles fought by ordinary people around him every day. Mireya gently reminded him that sometimes the strongest people are simply those who keep smiling because someone else depends on their courage. Inspired by everything he had learned, Everett established the Hail Hope Initiative, a program dedicated to helping working families facing medical emergencies. Thousands of employees across his businesses gained access to education grants, emergency food assistance, rehabilitation support, and counseling services. The initiative transformed countless lives, but Everett always insisted its greatest teacher remained the quiet housemaid who once sat alone beneath the rain. Years later, visitors entering Everett's corporate headquarters noticed one unusual photograph displayed near the entrance. It showed a simple wooden garden bench glistening after rainfall. There were no expensive cars, no office towers, and no awards in the picture. Only a weathered bench beneath a cloudy sky. Whenever executives asked why such an ordinary photograph occupied the most important place in the building, Everett simply smiled because that bench represented the day he discovered that compassion often hides behind silent sacrifice. If this story touched your heart, please like this video, leave a heartfelt comment, share it with someone who still believes kindness matters, and subscribe to Single Dad Empire so together we can continue sharing stories that inspire hope across the world. Special request: comment, "A kind heart changes everything," if you believe even the smallest act of compassion can transform someone's future. As the afternoon sun finally returned after the storm, its golden light reflected across the same garden where Mireya had once hidden her tears beneath falling rain. She no longer needed the rain to conceal her sadness because hope had found its way into her life. Rowan slowly walked beside her with growing confidence, and Everett stood nearby understanding that the greatest fortune he would ever possess was not measured in millions, but in the lives forever changed by choosing to notice one quiet employee sitting alone on a rainy day. Sometimes the most extraordinary miracles begin with something as simple as asking why someone is eating alone in the rain, and sometimes one moment of genuine compassion becomes the beginning of countless new tomorrows.